Hello and welcome to Copenhagen Fashion Week, Spring-Summer 2022. We're here to discuss the luxury industry as part of the Small Talks Big Conversation series. My name is Alec Leach. I'm a writer and consultant and the founder of Future Dust, which is an Instagram platform for responsible fashion. And joining me today, representing Zalando, we have Anna Berenberg, who is the buying director of the recently launched designer platform, which is part of Zalando's digital assortment. We have Emily Chan, who is the sustainability reporter for Vogue. We have Dio Kurosawa, who is the founder of Bear Scouts, who are a consultancy and agency that help brands become more responsible. We're here today to talk about luxury. Like so much of the fashion industry, luxury is in somewhat of a crossroads right now. There's a lot of big issues to talk about. There's issues of sustainability, there's digitization, there's a lot more younger, more diverse consumers entering the market. And we are gathered here today to talk about that, essentially, and have a bit of a think about where the luxury industry might go in the future. So first off, Anna, when people think of Zalando, they typically think of a more entry, mid-level kind of price point. So what does luxury mean to you guys right now?
Okay. So like you said, luxury is changing. And different editors or publications call it different things. Some say luxury is being democratized. Some say luxury has moved from a single pillar approach to doing collaborations, high-low collaborations, collaborations of interest, whatever it may be. What we think luxury is really the ability of self-expression. So what we're trying to do is find ways to become experts in our different areas. So Zalando Beauty, Zalando Designer, whatever it may be, and empower our consumer to be able to express themselves in the way they want, in the way they feel comfortable, in the way that they feel that they are engaging in luxury.
So it's a much more kind of open, less kind of niche and siloed off approach to luxury.
Yeah, and we also know that by 2025, more than half of the luxury purchases are going to be done by the Gen Z consumer. And so we believe that we need to address that consumer and encourage them, and they want to make value-based decisions, and they want to know that companies, 90% of Gen Z community want companies to make more sustainable decisions, to make decisions that actually improve the environment, not just withstand what's going on at the moment. So I think from whether it is the consumer specifically or the industry changing itself, it is changing, and we definitely need to address it in a more robust and with one voice, really, as an industry.
Absolutely. So speaking of sustainability, Emily, there's not that many fashion publications out there that actually have a dedicated sustainability reporter. Tell us a bit about that role and how it's come about and how long you've been there.
Yeah. So I think there are more and more of us, but you're right, it's still, there's probably still aren't enough of us. So I joined Vogue in 2019, right at the start of 2019, and that was just after the 2018 IPCC report, and obviously we've just had the latest one. But it felt that the climate movement was really gathering momentum at that point, and the conversations in the fashion industry around sustainability were really picking up. So it felt really natural for me to really focus on sustainability and really delve into the issues involved. And yeah, so the position of sustainability editor kind of came out of that and the ongoing conversations in the industry. So yeah, it involves kind of having in-depth look at, some of the issues, whether that's, the use of plastic in clothing, whether there should be, clearer labels on our clothes to help consumers, but also highlighting the work that brands are doing and the brands could be doing in order to reduce their impact on the environment.
And I guess you guys must have seen firsthand what Anna's described about Gen Z consumers being very, very demanding when it comes to this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, our readers on a whole are really becoming more and more concerned about sustainability. Our audience insights team recently did a survey that found, I think it was nearly 70% of our readers think sustainability is a really important factor when making purchases. And I think it's really interesting, actually, from that survey that they were saying that they want the brands that they already buy from, that they're already buying from, to become more sustainable rather than necessarily looking elsewhere. So I think that's really something that brands can respond to and, kind of be aware of that, even if they're not doing that much at the moment, customers are really wanting it and they should be responding.
But you can also read between the lines a little there, where when customers say that they want to shop sustainably from brands they already have, that kind of implies that sustainability isn't necessarily top of mind when it comes to buying decisions.
I think that the onus can't be on the consumer, and that's probably something we'll talk about later on. And I think that is part of it, that they don't have all the information available. Accessibility is a big issue in terms of price point. So I think that's actually a big concern that's kind of coming out from that, is that how do we make sustainability more accessible to consumers and not put all the responsibility on consumers, and actually brands be responding to these concerns and them not having to be faced with lots of difficult decisions.
Speaking of brands and sustainability, Dio, when it comes to the luxury part of the industry, how do things look in the supply chains of brands when it comes to sustainability? Because you would conventionally think that because these products are a higher price, there's more rooms in the margin, there's a lot more opportunity for a lot of these brands to become more sustainable, essentially.
I mean, yes, there's an opportunity, of course, but we all live in a capitalist economy, and those are big wheels that have been turning for a very long time. So, what's been created there is been created in order to, ensure that they can pay their bills, make a profit, and invest and make their shareholders happy. So, I personally believe they should be leading by example, of course, but what's their incentive to do so? So, we have, I live in a bubble, so I make responsible things for brands, retailers, and I help the supply chain to be more responsible. But at the same time, these are, luxury brands are, there's no reason for them outside of having a good heart and wanting to do better for the world, for them to lead by example. I mean, they do have LTAs often in their HQs, which means that they can create a sample. Often they will ship that sample around to different parts of the world where it's more financially interesting for them to create production, just to keep that wheel turning. So, they have outliers, of course. You have some luxury brands who are really consciously aware. Like, I kind of consider Ghani a luxury brand. They're really in the whole phase of trying to change things and transitioning into being an even more responsible brand. And they're conscious of it, and they're figuring out ways to keep that. It's not a long time they've been in business, but they're trying to figure out ways for their business model and their profits to continue without having to have such a negative impact on the environment. And we're here to support that kind of thing, but it's not the norm.
It also depends on how you define luxury as well.
That's true.
A Greg Lauren could also be considered luxury in the same way that Gucci or Louis Vuitton could.
Well, we work with Greg, so when you mentioned Greg is a great guy, but at the same time, his heart is first off in taking care of the planet, which is why most of his things are upcycled and in fact are made from scraps. So yes, I would consider him luxury, but again, he is definitely an outlier. And
he also has somewhat of a more mature kind of audience compared to what we're talking about with Gen Z. And when you look at the Zalando kind of demographic, how important is sustainability to your customers?
Very important. So we have, as of last week, 44 million active customers.
It's also important to point out that you guys also have amazing data on these customers, right? There's a whole team of Zalando people who are doing research into that, right?
Yeah, exactly. The data is, it's not everything, but it's important. And it's important to reference and make human decisions from that data. So yeah, there's a lot of data. So there are, because of the 44 million active customers, a large amount of which are Gen Z and young millennials, more than half. And we know from the most recent McKinsey reports that 90% of Gen Z consumers care that companies are making more sustainable choices. The issue is less if we know that they care about sustainability or not. We know that they care about it. We see how they use the filters on site. We see that the increasing number of sustainable product that's being bought, like really from the data, like you say. The challenge is between the willingness to make and the want to make sustainable choices and the behavior to make sustainable choices.
There's a gap.
There's a gap, and that's the right word. And we created a gap report, essentially, called It Takes Two, where it identifies, different blockers for consumers to be able to make sustainable choices. And this report is available for anyone to access. It's on our corporate website, because what we very much want is that brands go to that report and take a look and use that report to, and industry leaders to use that report to really make decisions. And if we can address those, some topics like inspiration, that you were kind of referring to, other topics around transparency. We don't have a sustainability team at Zalando, we have sustainability teams, and they're in our different business units. So within our DX or UX, you might call it, team, there's a sustainability team, trying to make the user journey as clear and transparent as possible. So if you want to filter by value, water usage, vegan leathers, you can do so. Or if you're in a product page, you can understand why something is marked more sustainable. There's clear definition there, because maybe there is no industry standard. And that's why we need to get together as an industry, publications, brands, third-party industry experts, etc., to be able to come up with one language that we can actually use to help reduce this gap.
Speaking of consumer behavior, Emily, how have you noticed that the priorities and the values of the Vogue reader have changed, if they are changing?
I think that, especially during the pandemic, we've seen Vogue readers becoming more and more concerned about sustainability. I think there is a greater awareness about needing to shop better, buying less, buying more consciously, thinking more about buying secondhand, rental. I think these are all becoming a bit more mainstream. I think there is probably still a way to go in terms of, I guess you could say, the consumer at large, in terms of, who's actually, as you say, a lot of people are talking about it, but who's actually acting. And again, it comes down to, I think, accessibility, and making it as easy for the consumer as possible. But I think in terms of where they are, they're really concerned about sustainability, and they really want to be doing the right thing. But it's just, the information available to them is kind of lacking, really.
Yeah. It's not, I think you so often see that we talk about consumers wanting to make informed decisions, but there's a lot of information lacking in some cases.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that is something that, covering this area, I would really like to see more of, is brands being more transparent about what they're actually doing. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of buzzwords, but as you say, kind of detailed information about why is this a more sustainable purchase? What is it? What's its impact on the planet? I think that'd be really helpful for consumers, and also for brands to actually tell us what they're doing as well.
Speaking of that, Dio, how have you noticed that the last year or so has impacted your work in the supply chain? Has it put a halt to it? Has it paused? Has it stopped?
No, I mean, we don't want to be naked, right? So we still are, trying to buy things to make us feel better. But what we've realized is that the suppliers, they called brands partners for so long, and when the pandemic hit and materials were a bit scarce, these brands often pulled out with loads of fabric, millions of dollars of fabric sitting in warehouses that were left for the factories to figure it out. So we came up with a lot of different programs to help the supply chain. Like we have something called in-kind investment that helps to narrow the inequality gap that exists between this so-called partnership between brands and the supply chain. And now we have scenarios where the brands actually pay into a gross profit margin back to the supply chain for the sales that the supplier have had a hand in
Almost like
creating
a
on the
royalty,
garments. It's like a royalty. It's like a royalty. So there's a vested interest on both sides to work well together, but it's not like you're leaving the supplier in the dust. But it also gives the supplier an opportunity to take part in something that they've created. And it's not, I mean, I'll be honest, it's not that's 50% or anything like that. It's an interesting percentage, but we're able to create wealth in the supply chain, which is something that is very difficult to do when you're just getting the cost of goods from a brand, and that brand is marking it up, a great deal more than that. So we're really happy to see and work with different suppliers to help them to figure out new and innovative ways to tap into resources and financial resources, to be honest, so that they're not left in the lurch when these things will probably happen again.
Speaking of solutions there, Anna, like how do you see Zalando playing a role, both in terms of the industry as a whole, but also in the consumer, of being part of a transition towards a more sustainable future?
So, I mean, it's a very multifaceted question, but from a consumer point of view, there's probably two major topics. One is the transparency that we've already talked about, but the other is the inspiration, which I touched upon. And so one example of what we're doing, which Alec, you and Dio are involved in, is the Academy.
Right.
So we know that Zalando ambassadors and influencers at large are inspirational. Consumers look to those people to inspire them, to motivate them, to encourage them, to whatever it may be. And we know that the consumer believes that there's not enough inspiration out there that's influencers in this case talking about sustainability and doing it in a fun way. And the most important thing about luxury in my eyes, let's say, is that it's this celebration of creativity. And so we now have this academy where influencers and our ambassadors can come and be amongst sustainability experts, and they can learn about sustainability within the fashion industry, and even more importantly, ask questions back to the sustainability experts on, I got posed this question, like how should I answer it, or this makes me feel uncomfortable, or X, Y, Z, and to the point where this academy has a WhatsApp group where each influencer can actually type in, challenging questions that they're posed with, so that they can start feeling comfortable, because of course, the fear and the risk that we all know around greenwashing is real.
Yeah.
It's and we need to make sure that we don't lose the creativity and fun and inspiration in beautiful fashion because of fear. And so this is just one example. There are other examples out there. Yeah.
It's a very steep hill to climb, it seems at times. Emily, speaking of that, how can the media and publishers do a better job of talking about sustainability?
I think there are two main things the media can do. I think one is helping raise awareness of the issues. I think, everyone buys clothes. Well, most people buy clothes. We have to wear clothes. I don't think everyone knows the impact that clothes have on the planet. I think in the fashion industry, the conversation is definitely picking up. More and more people are becoming aware. But I think, the shopper at large probably still doesn't realize exactly what they're buying when they're going into the shop. So I think raising awareness of that, helping educate consumers, and then also helping with consumers navigating greenwashing as well. Because, when you're faced with a lot of brands who are all saying they're doing sustainable things, how do you know which one to pick?
It's very difficult to know what that actually looks like.
100%. So I think, that's one part of it. And I think the second part of it, the second main part of it, is holding brands accountable. Again, seeing, what are they actually claiming, and how does that stack up with what they're actually doing. And also, holding brands accountable and really calling for change within the industry. I think the media can really, make a difference in that way, and create systemic change by holding brands accountable.
That's a great point. Dio, just to close up, we are getting towards the end of our time here. How do you see, what opportunities are there for the luxury industry to operate more responsible businesses?
Well, I think one of the things that is important that we have Zalando here, we have Vogue here, and the questions that should be asked to brands are things like a life cycle assessment. So everything that we create for our customers comes along with a life cycle assessment. Takes away all the guesswork, takes away the greenwashing, and allows them to say, hey, this is where we are. This is not the impact we would like to have, but we're trying to improve. So this collection, our LCA is not amazing, but we're working on it. And I think that approach, it helps obviously consumers, but it also takes away the guesswork.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, you know, it's talking about the transparency aspect of things, but it's, you know, it's just an honest way to move forward. And if you can't just break away the barriers and just look at where you are, then we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, we all have to do better, and we know that. I mean, you had the IPCC report tell us this already. Even before this last report, it was telling us this. So it's up to us now to just say, you know what, I'm accountable. This is the brand that I work with. This is the brand that you know I've helped build, or this is where I am as a supplier. This is where I am as a retailer. I need you to give me hard facts. An LCA exists, so it's not something that we have to create, and present this to the world. Retailers can present it on products. Vogue or publications can talk about this new collection came out. The LCA for the collection ranks here and against the last one, and that should be a subject point. At least then we're talking about, let's say, report cards. You remember those, and you can benchmark, you can improve, and you can move on beyond that. So I think us all coming together the way we are now, sharing ideas and feeding that back to our industry is important.
So just finally to sum up, Emily, what would you say, give us one thing that you think needs to happen from the industry in order for us to be able to get towards a better future?
I really think at the moment it's cutting down CO2 emissions, and I hate to make it as blunt as that, but after the IPCC report, as we've been talking about, that is the urgent priority, and it has to be. And what are brands doing to do that, and across the supply chain as well, not just switching to renewable energy in their own operations.
Yeah.
It has to be across the supply chain, and I think that is what needs to happen, and it needs to happen now, really.
The supply chain is in a lot of ways the elephant in the room when it comes to sustainability right now.
Yeah.
Anna, just to quickly sum up for us, how do you think we can work together better in order to get to a better, more sustainable future?
I think the biggest challenge is language. We don't have one language that we speak, and so if we can come together and come up with a language that we agree on is the right language to speak, and the collaboration to drive positive impact together through language and collaboration, that would be the most impactful thing.
It always comes back to transparency, essentially.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Always comes back to that. So we're out of time now, but thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube. This has been Small Talks, Big Conversations for Copenhagen Fashion Week, Spring Summer 22. Thank you so much. And thank you to our guests.